Okay, we are back, and we'll move now to the next submission, which is an oral presentation by the Old Fort William Cottagers Association, as outlined in the 18H 2.29. And I understand, Ms. McCann, you're going to make the presentation?
Yes.
Over to you.
Good afternoon. My name is Joann McCann, and I am representing the Old Fort William Cottagers Association. We call ourselves OFWCA. Our association was founded in 1991. It represents over 150 cottage and year-round residents on the Ottawa River in Sheenborough and Fort William. These individuals and families comprise the nearest downriver neighbors of the Chalk River Laboratories. Our organization has always been concerned about the Ottawa River and our environment, and has put those concerns into actions. We had and continue to have a cottager on the CNL Stewardship Committee well before the CNL proposed the NSDF and this proposed extension to the license. On a personal note, I grew up in the area. Members of my family did work at Atomic Energy. I have friends, some of our cottagers work there. So I just want to kind of preface that, you know, we hear NIMBY, but we are members of the community also, who have friends who work there and family members and such. So I would like you to keep that in mind. I also, when I get in my kayak in the middle of my bay, which is Downey's Bay, I can look upriver and I can see the plant. So it's kind of an omnipresent part of our community and our landscape on the river. So I'm going to try to be brief because I really don't want to. I'm hearing people are getting weary, and I don't want to raise any of the changes that have already been brought to your attention. I'll try to, and you have my submission, which notes the changes that are of concern to us, but I will give you kind of the rationale of why we are concerned. It has been determined that many license conditions, as many as half of the current conditions, and several hundred compliance verification criteria have been deleted from the CNSC's proposed new site license for Chalk River Laboratories. These considerable changes are very concerning. The CNSC's stated mandate is to protect health, safety, security, and the environment. And the CNSC is the sole regulator at present. How can the CNSC justify such a license which would benefit only CNL and give CNL far too much freedom to act without sufficient regulation and oversight? We feel the consequences to the environment could be enormous. Consequently, our Cottage Association strongly requests that this license for CRL contain detailed, stringent regulations. We feel it's not the time for CNSC to modify, eliminate, or substantially weaken any of the current regulations, which we feel is appears to be what CNSC is proposing for this new license. In fact, our Cottage Association would like to see some regulations strengthened and others added to the license. Although it is understood that either the radioactive waste dump or the NSDF, nor revitalization activities such as setting up the small modular reactors, SMR, as they're referred to, at CRL, are supposed to be part of the current discussions, the subject will be referred to, in that all such activities must be regulated and monitored by the CNSC. The cusp of my presentation is that we strongly object to CNL being granted a 10-year license. We echo those who aren't in favor of a GoCo. Why? A 10-year license has not been granted before for CRL. We question why now, and we can't see any rationale for the 10-year license when there's no precedent for it. We strongly urge CNSC to limit a new license to a maximum of 3 years or to extend the current license for a maximum of 3 years ending in 2021. In 3 years' time, CNL's contract and the license for CRL could both be reviewed. Then we feel CNL's performance should be measured at that time. Why do we believe such strict regulations are important? Frankly, we lack faith in the GoCo model. A private consortium, CNEA, is running CNL. The mandate for private companies is to make profits. The main priority of the consortium, therefore, is not the safety nor the health of the environment. As well, 4 of the 5 of the companies involved are not Canadian. And when the contract terminates, these companies and their CEOs will no longer have any real concern for CRL or the Ottawa River and us downriver communities. And the 5th company, SNC-Lavalin, certainly does not have a stellar reputation. Judging by CNL's track record to date, regulation and oversight are essential with this consortium. And I'll just summarize the paragraph at the top of page 2. Another disconcerting kind of issue is that we have learned, and it was in the recent Auditor General's report, in paragraph 17, that AECL staff has shrunk from 3,400 to 40 in recent years. This is concerning. As AECL is the owner of Chalk River Laboratories and the waste, shouldn't AECL actually be the licensee? Finally, sorry, not finally, I have a little bit more. CNL will be engaging in activities regarding waste management and revitalization, which all require stringent regulation. The creation of a disposal facility has been a key element in CNL's objectives, and we believe, and it's been our Cottage Association has been fairly public and transparent, that CNL is failing in this regard. This consortium designed the worst possible facility to be situated in the worst possible location, and then presented the public with a draft environmental impact statement that was full of errors, lacked details, and a great deal of necessary information. I have attended many of their open houses, and they share a lot of information, but one of their staffers said, the NSDF is a proven technology. Yet, several months after, the CNL had to remove intermediate level waste from the proposal. It kind of shakes your public trust when the story keeps changing along the way. CNL's track record indicates that all of CNL's activities, now and in the future, must be regulated in the strictest possible way. We feel mistrust of this consortium could not be higher due to CNL's own failings to date. Now, in our submission, we had several pages of changes in the proposed license that we have concerns. I won't go over them. They've been raised, and but I encourage you to review them. There's some strong wording, and as I said, we really feel that those the regulation should be strengthened rather reduced. And I know tomorrow emergency management is going to be discussed. We're asking because the Provincial Nuclear Emergency Response Plan is for Ontario and Quebec has no PNURP, that we would like to know how CNL, how they are funding emergency services and the drafting and of emergency plans in Quebec. So we're hoping tomorrow that can be covered. So I'm going to jump ahead. In some of the proposed changes, one of them, and it's in our submission on page 4, relates to, at the bottom, it would be the 12.3 of the current license, nuclear legacy liabilities. It is going to be deleted, and the wording is, the licensee shall ensure that nuclear legacy liabilities at the CRL site are addressed. That is of great concern to us. We feel that any new license should be underlining this requirement and not deleting it. Legacy waste is of utmost concern to us. I'm seeing my yellow light, so I'm going to speed up. The last two comments are, we feel the entire license renewal process needs major improvement and transparency. Other interveners have raised that, the accessibility of documents and trying to wade through it. My final comment, CNSC must live up to be a regulator. The new license or renewal of the current license should be a maximum of 3 years. This is an important moment for CNSC to regain trust and improve its reputation. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody? Dr. Solomon?
Question to staff. In page 3 of the submission, the intervener is asking a question about if excessive releases of radioactive material occur due to an extreme event such as weather, would a complete report be submitted to the commission? And I would like you to also mention the mechanism of reporting and which reg documents are regulate that.
Haiti Tatters for the record. So any releases of radioactive substances to the environment, whether they be due to extreme event or not, are reported to the CNSC. In December of 2017, we presented our reporting requirements, regulatory document 3.1.2, reporting requirements for non-power reactor. And that is where, and I believe the Commission has recently approved and has been published on our website and is available for the public or anyone to review that document. So in that document, it sets out the requirements for reporting to the CNSC. We have a 24-hour duty officer on call, so any event that occurs, the licensees are required to notify that duty officer. That requirement is found in our regulatory document as well. And the Commission is very familiar with in early information reports, so events that trigger criteria that need to be presented to the Commission, such as releases to the environment. We submit to the Commission an early information report that gets presented to the Commission with the corrective actions that are being proposed by the licensee and the regulatory activities that the CNSC staff are undergoing. Should there be a need for further enforcement actions, such as orders or potentially administrative monetary penalties because of a lack of control that was surmised because of the release, the CNSC staff implement those enforcement actions as well. So a lot to say about reporting. Currently, within the current license condition handbook, there is a section that is dedicated to reporting requirements. It defines what needs to be reported. Changes to documentation need to be reported. So I'm going a little outside of the excessive releases, but specific to your question, the answer is yes, and there are multiple mechanisms by which the public are notified, can get engaged, and we at the CNSC provide regulatory oversight to ensure control is brought back.
This answers the question?
I have a specific question, though, that is a very good example. This spring we had heavy rains. Many of our cottagers were concerned about the impact of rains, and because the CRL site has many creeks that flow into the Ottawa River. So my questions kind of relate to CNSC and CRL. So does that mean you have an inspector comes out right away to see if there is additional leachate into the river because of those heavy rains? And the other part of that question, which relates to it, and because I work in government and I know a little bit about ATIP, how can an ordinary citizen find out if there was an inspection at the time, if it is a GOCO? Who do we submit an ATIP request? Do we submit it to CNSC? because, or do we set it, is it in, like, directed it to CRL? This is the kind of clarity that ordinary citizens do not know where to get that kind of information and comfort level.
Provide an answer.
Haiti Tadros, for the record, so with regards to heavy rains, I would actually bring forward an example that was recently brought before the Commission, and it did involve Canadian Nuclear Laboratories. There was heavy rains and excessive flooding that occurred in the Port Hope and Port Granby area. While I suspect Canadian Nuclear Laboratories may not want to bring reference to it today, I would ask that they describe the series of events that they went through to report the event to the CNSC. And on our end, as mentioned, what we did through the duty officer report, we brought the information forward to the Commission. We did conduct a follow-up inspection right away. We had 2 of our staff that went on site. That was also included in the information in the early information report to the Commission. The inspection reports are available to the public should the public request them, but the information that an inspection has occurred is out in the public domain. And a part of our regulatory oversight reports, we also include a listing of all the events that have occurred, and if there were any inspections, we also indicate that inspections happen, and those are also available to the public upon request. So maybe I'll ask CNL to describe what they went through because of the heavy rains that occurred earlier last spring.
This is Kurt Keeler for the record. Port Hope and Port Granby, which encompasses 2 separate projects. There were extensive heavy rains in that region in the spring, which caused some of the older facilities, historical facilities, to overflow. Those overflows did make it off property, and so upon discovering that, we reported that to CNSC. Obviously, inspections quickly happened after that, as well as we stopped any overflow events as quickly as we could. Upon completion of that, we worked on a corrective action plan, an action plan to change how the storm waters would be dealt with in those areas for even a more significant rainfall event, which led us to add more temporary measures, temporary water storage tanks, and other assorted efforts to deal with potential heavy storm events down there in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I
Dr.
could add,
McEwen?
could I just add that the incident that Mr. Keeler just described at Port Hope, Port Granby is not part of the site licensed activities for Chalk River, but it is under CNL, and the learnings from that have been disseminated across the company. And at Chalk River, we have a stormwater management system that's been put in place in recent years in order to help address this kind of issue.
Dr. McEwen?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. The bottom of page 4, where you talk about the deletion of the licensee shall ensure that nuclear legacy liabilities at CRL are addressed. Can staff help us where that would now be found?
Haiti Tadros, for the record, as was brought reference to yesterday, the nuclear legacy liabilities program per se may have ended. The liabilities and the financial guarantees associated are being tracked under the waste management program in the current, in the proposed license and the LCH.
So the liabilities or the legacy from previous activities at Chalk River that were covered under that are now all covered under the waste management section of the LCH and the regulations that support that.
Haiti Tadros, for the record, that is correct.
Demeter?
A number of interveners, thank you for your presentation, have brought up the GOCO model and the for-profit model. And this question to CNL may actually clarify that. So, as I understand it, you are contracted and given a certain amount of money based on deliverables that are agreed to in a plan that's been approved by AECL. What happens to revenues, net revenues, above and beyond what your contracted and paid for, where does that money go?
Mark Lisinski, for the record, any cost savings that we come up with doing things more efficiently, which is one of the drivers we have at the site to ensure that we're doing things safely first, but efficiently as well. Any extra revenues from extra commercial activities that we might get that go above and beyond as well as the plan, all of those funds go to Treasury and to the benefit of the taxpayer. That does not come to the consortium.
So it goes back to government?
Correct.
Okay. So there's no profit-driven activities in the sense you're given a certain amount of money for certain deliverables to produce them efficiently. Commercialization and profit from those activities get flowed back into government.
Correct. Could I add a little more, though, about from a safety perspective, if I might, just quickly? It's, safety is our number one priority and our value at the site. If there's one thing all of the companies that have worked in the nuclear business or the individuals here that have worked in it for decades is if we don't have a really stringent, tight understanding of our safety protocol in order to execute any work, the rest of that, the profit and trying to get the schedule done, won't happen. It just won't happen. It's going to stop. And we've learned that in the past the hard way. So when we come anywhere to work, and all the CNL people, as we work together, we know that that is truly our number one priority because nothing else comes without it. So cutting corners, it doesn't work. And that does not increase profits, it decreases. So safety is truly our number one priority. And I did talk in my opening comments, people can go back and review it, as to actually how we are reimbursed, and it's not based on cutting corners or increasing revenues at the expense of. So it's very important. I'd add one more final thing. In order for us to stay in this kind of business, any of these companies, when they do, if they don't get the contract and they move on and go and do something else, without a great safety record, they won't even have the price of admission to go in and compete and do any more work around the world. It doesn't work.
Thank you. Any other question? Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, one sentence. I hope that their stellar reputations will be intact, but for myself, who is a river activist, any kind of facility or dump type nuclear radioactive waste 1 kilometer from the river is unsatisfactory, and I really hope these companies have the foresight and that their plan and our regulators are really reviewing that with such, rigor. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your intervention.